Well, good afternoon, everyone. I think we might get underway. I know there are still a few people who are coming in. Thank you very much for attending this afternoon's session on mayoral leadership and local knowledge, which builds nicely on the session that we had before lunch. We've gone sort of federal and state, and now we're at local level, which is really important. We're going to draw on key messages from our community consultations findings, but also the knowledge that sits on the panel here as well. And this session is going to examine how national security is experienced at the community level and what that means. And that was a really strong theme that came out of the consultations. And as we saw this morning, there's that feeling that our citizens feel national security is a very local, very intimate thing. So I'm really privileged to have this panel today. I'm conscious, I used to be the Electoral Commissioner, and we used to say that trust in democracy has a front door, and that front door is local government. Now, you can tell me later on whether you agree with that or not, and I've often thought it's because it's where democracy stops talking and actually starts doing, and it's what people experience as a really impactful part of our democratic architecture, which is why it's so important and why I'm so very grateful to be here today. I think we're going to have a look at what's in the Community Consultations report. You've already will have seen that what people really prioritise is the peaceful continuity of everyday life. And I made the comment this morning that those inside the national security tent quite often talk from the national border outwards. What citizens are telling us is that for many of them, national security starts at their front door and moves out from there. They're very aware of the border, they're interested in the border, but they're interested in the sorts of things that impact on their daily lives. And we've seen many of those things in the findings in addition to being safe and peaceful communities. People are concerned about national security, but they're also concerned about other things that they think are part of national security, like mis and disinformation, and we might talk about that today. So, we've got a great panel, and just to start at the end and work my way round, we've got Anthea Hancox. Anthea is the CEO of the Scanlon Institute, which many of you will have heard of, leading national work to make high-quality research on social cohesion accessible and meaningful. Earlier on, Anthea, I appeared on one of your podcasts where we talked about many of these issues, and I think it's going to be published in April. So please keep an eye out for that as well. She brings experience across government, professional services, academia, philanthropy, and not-for-profit. And she's got fellowships at Monash, Toronto Metropolitan University, and the Australian Institute of Company Directors. And we'll start off with Anthea in a minute. So thank you very much, Anthea. Then we've got Councillor Dale Harriman. Dale, thank you very much for joining us. Long-serving community representative who joined Latrobe Council in 2011, currently serves as Deputy Mayor, having previously served as Mayor in 2014 and 24-25, and with a focus on local jobs, economic development and community services. Dale, thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to talking about some of the issues we were talking about upstairs, which are going to be very relevant as well. Then we've got Councillor Chris Cherry, the Mayor of Tweed Shire, previously served 3 years as Deputy Mayor after being elected in 2016. She draws on long experience as a trained biophysicist and a long-standing community advocate, and she's also the chair of the Northern Rivers Joint Organisation as well. So thank you very much for coming along. Then we've got Mayor Dallas Tout, has served on Wagga Wagga City Council since 2012, is the current Mayor, having previously served multiple terms as Deputy Mayor, and brings more than 25 years of local government leadership and community service. So thank you very much for coming along. Very important city. It's where I met my wife. Went out with her first up, so it holds a special place in my heart as well, having lived there at the same time. And then finally, we've got Mayor Tanya Taylor, the elected Mayor of Willoughby City Council, and serves as the President of the Northern City Regional Organisation of Councils and a Director of Local Government New South Wales. Thank you very much to all of you for being here, and I really look forward to you enhancing that conversation that we've had, given the strong survey results about how citizens think locally, and I'm really looking forward to that. So I am going to ask each of them to make a little statement to start with, but I thought we might do some framing up front. And Anthony, I might get you to do that if you don't mind. From the consultations, from your own work, from Scanlon, how are Australians experiencing national security in their daily lives?
Well, I'm going to speak a little bit from the social cohesion perspective, particularly in the consultations, the social cohesion and civic fabric components. The respondents referred in there to this being something that we need to protect and to invest in, and I'd certainly advocate for that. Social cohesion, though, and I think sometimes people don't necessarily know, but we've studied social cohesion for nearly 20 years now, only in Australia, and we've been able to track the trends of social cohesion over that time. And it usually comes as a bit of a surprise to lots of people that our level of social cohesion, which is at 78, has remained stable over the last 3 years. So it is really important that we remember that this is a highly cohesive society as a starting point. Social cohesion, though, has, as a number of people have referenced different types of definitions, it actually doesn't have an agreed international definition, but essentially the components are that it needs a shared vision. We all need to be heading in the same direction. It needs a well-functioning community with shared goals and responsibilities and a readiness to cooperate, which has come up a number of times in the previous sessions. It is a never-ending process. You never get to a point of being socially cohesive, so you can just brush it off and then go ahead with everything else. But I'd also like to add that it should be non-political, and it also needs emphasising democratic values. Values, though, can be a very difficult term as it needs to be linked to recognising individuals' interpretation of the Australian identity, which actually includes multiculturalism, respect, fair go for all, and safety and security. Social cohesion, though, is not a singular thing. We measure it across 5 different domains: worth, social justice, acceptance, belonging, and participation. So it's quite complex. But one's association with these domains varies over one's lifespan. Different aspects of it are more important to you when you're young, and different aspects are more important to you when you get older. For instance, when you're young, your level of acceptance is about 50 points above the average, whereas when you actually get older, the 75 and plus, your level of acceptance is nearly 20 points below the average. So there's a number of different things that vary over your lifetime. They also vary over the length of time that somebody lives in Australia. You tend to become a little bit more cynical the longer that you're here. But of course, economic opportunities, mobility and optimism impact social cohesion both directly and indirectly. So essentially, if people are aware of inequality in their society, they are negatively impacted by that knowledge as much as they are as if they were the people that were actually suffering from inequality. Immigration has been another one of those things that has been a topic of quite a lot of conversation. For most Australians, and certainly through our surveys, who is migrating is not the issue. It's generally how many, which is very much influenced by blame narratives for all sorts of social dynamics, including housing and congestion, for instance. But there are such important positive dynamics in our local areas, which I'm sure the mayors will hopefully be able to resonate with. 90% of people believe that somebody who was born outside of Australia makes just as good a citizen as somebody who was born here. 81% believe that migrants are good for the economy. 82% of people in my local area are willing to help their neighbours, is general sentiment. 81% believe that neighbours from different backgrounds get on well together, and 80% feel like they belong in their neighbourhood. But at the same time, only 57% feel that they have a voice on issues in their local area. And I think that's going to come up as being one of those very important aspects to do with national security, and has already been mentioned in previous sessions. So our greatest strength and resilience actually sits in our neighbourhoods. This is the most trusted level of government, And it's an incredibly valuable gift that people have given to our councils. Mayors are the guardians of those gifts, that trust, and they have to speak to it. They have to look to protect it and inspire everyone living in their neighbourhoods to be optimistic about the future. Thank you, Tom.
That's great framing, Anthea, except for the fact of the cynicism. I'm just looking at my own age and the age of many of people in the room here. That means we've got quite a hard-bitten audience that we've got to win over as part of that today. So, now look, each of the mayors have prepared a little statement to start with, just talking broadly about your views, local government, national security. Then we'll probe that in more detail with some questions, and I do want to leave sufficient time for people to engage with our local government representatives as well. So, please.
Thanks, Tom. I'll try to be brief because I know the others have got a little bit to say. For those that don't know Latrobe City Council, we're in Victoria, southeast. We're home to all of Victoria's coal-fired power stations. We've gone through and continue to go through a lot of social upheaval. We were fortunate, and I'll get on to how the feeling of security has disappeared in Latrobe City. We were fortunate in that one of Australia's greatest mines and probably their greatest military organiser in Sir John Monash actually set up the Latrobe Valley. In the 1930s, the Victorian government got him to come in and start the SEC, the State Electricity Commission. And one of the things that Sir John Monash did in the 40s and 50s was look at who we needed to bring in from overseas to work in and build up numerous power stations and dig numerous coal mines. Probably the best known park in Latrobe City is Immigration Park, which has a very large statue of a European-looking gentleman with a briefcase in his hand, and it has a tablet, 15 tablets behind it that show the 80 regions, and I say regions rather than countries, 80 regions that John Monash picked out to bring people to Latrobe City to build it from a farming area into the industrial heartland of Victoria. What we've seen with Sir John was he picked, and for those that don't know, Latrobe City has three main towns, Morwell, Moe, Traralgon, all about 15 kilometres apart, and a university town about 10 kilometres away. Sir John actually picked regions through Europe and some South American and brought people from those regions that would get on with each other and put them in different towns. So we started off with coal mines in Victoria, brown coal mines. We started off with black coal power stations that didn't really work that well. So John went to Germany after the war, brought Germans in, as you do, because they've got a history of brown coal mines. He brought Southern Italians in. He brought Croatians in. He brought Dutch in. He brought a range of communities in and placed them in different towns so that they would work in but not step on each other's toes. And one of the things that we look at with that, and one of the lessons we've learnt from what's happened now in our region, is it was almost like a controlled diversification of the community. He didn't build slums. He put people into well-paid jobs but kept them in their communities of content so that groups that wouldn't get on weren't living around each other. We've followed that, and the SEC for its lifespan followed that, and we tend to still have huge numbers of Italians and Greeks, or Italians from southern Italy. We have lots of Greeks from southern Greece. We actually have more people from the town of Spinetti in Morwell than actually live in the city of Spinetti in Italy. They've done it really, really well. But then with the closure of the SEC, we've run into a case of we're starting to bring people in that bring discord to the community. And an example, if I can, Tom, the SEC brought in a lot of Arabic engineers, particularly because they had a background in oil and gas, and they're very, very good engineers when it comes to running coal-fired power stations. Most of those engineers were Sunni Muslims. What we've seen over the last 8 to 10 years is an influx of Shia Muslims. Now, both really good people. I've been to Eid events with both communities, and I'm now not welcome in either community because I went to either's Eid festival. And it's that level of discord where there was no discussion with the local council about who do we bring into your area, what are we going to do to facilitate growth in your area, and where do you want that growth to come from? One thing John Monash did really, really well was use locals that are migrant locals to bring more migrants in. So they brought family, they brought friends, they brought people from their regions. So there was a comfort there, and there was a citizenship building. A lot of our migrants are so happy. They're third, fourth generation now, but they're so happy of where they came from and that they're part of a larger community. One of the problems we're facing now is we're getting communities coming in that are bringing discord from their homeland, and it's not their fault. We're bringing a discord between different groups from overseas and putting them together here and expecting them to get on, and it just won't happen. Not without a lot of time and effort being put into it. And the biggest problem you face as a local government is there's no input federally or state into what's happening on our streets. They don't know. We quite often say we talk to federal and state governments. Quite often we're just listening to them, they don't listen to us, and it's a problem. We know our communities. We know what's going to work and what's not going to work in our communities. As I said, Latrobe City is built on migrants, and we love it. If you ever walk into Traralgon, there's over 200 eateries. That's a town of 30,000, 38,000 people. Over 200 eateries, and we cover just about every demographic. And it's great, and it's a great community. Soccer games get a bit narky, but you get that. But it's a really, really strong community. It's got a lot of resilience for what we've been through with the end of the coal-fired power station, with the coal mine fire that went for 30 days within 300 metres of one of our towns. The community is really strong, but what we're not getting is state and federal governments listening to us on who to bring into our areas, what's going to work and what's not going to work. Thanks, Tom.
Great, thanks, Dale. And we might probe that a little later on, that bit about that link between the next level of government and just how much true consultation goes on, or whether, as you're saying, it's just effectively a one-way conversation. It's a really interesting perspective. Chris.
Thanks very much, Tom. And the Tweed community is a regional centre that's on the southern side of the Queensland-New South Wales border, and it's got a very different story to Latrobe. We have around 100,000 people, and we're spread across 1,300 square kilometres, so there's quite a large shire and a large population for a regional area to manage. We also have the unfortunate title of being recognised as one of the areas in the Australian East Coast that is most vulnerable to climate change impacts. And I joined council in 2016. I was deputy mayor, and 3 months later we had the biggest flood that we had in 2017 for more than 50 years. And, you know, it was titled a 1 in 100 flood, and our community got through it, picked themselves up and, got on with the job. But 5 years later, then we had an even bigger flood that was in some areas of our shire was a 1 in 500 thing. And the community started to say, just a minute, that was 1 in 100, this was 1 in 500. They start not to trust the information that you've been given, and you need to change that narrative, because a flood is not a 1 in 100 event. It's a 1% event. In any year there's a 1% chance of it happening, and so we find that we have to change that narrative. And this time last year we had ex-tropical cyclone Alfred impact on us. So in 2017, it was a big impact. But in 2022, we had like 2,200 of our families had their homes flooded, and 500 of those families lost their home completely because it was so damaged. And so that really calls into question for our communities. They, in terms of feeling safe and peaceful, they don't feel safe if they don't have shelter. And that basic human right of seeking shelter, because of the floods that we've seen and the natural hazard events, that has really compounded an affordable housing issue that we already had, or a lack of housing issue that we had. And so people are there's a level of distrust that's building in the community, because a government should be able to provide shelter for all and safe homes for all, and that's something we haven't been able to provide in our circumstance. And then when we had Cyclone Alfred last year, we had some in our community didn't have power for 12 days, and they couldn't get some. A lot of times, if you live in the country, you have a generator so you can power your fridge, but there was fuel supplies were also cut at that time, and so there was no fuel for generators, and there was no way of having power, and it really made our community realise how vulnerable we are, and so I think for our community, the question of national security, that question of what makes us feel safe and peaceful, is knowing that the services work, is that when you turn your tap on, that water will flow, and it's clean water and it's drinkable, and or that when you flush the toilet, that's going to work, because that's really important just to your daily life, and that's something that we could not provide when we had no power, because although as a local council we have backup generators for our pump stations and water supply stations, that backup fuel only lasts so long, and when the fuel supply lines are cut, then there's nothing we can do. And so it just really heightened that issue of infrastructure vulnerability, and the need to make sure that we have more hardening, and the need to move our community in some way, in some places, to adapt and take them out of that flood risk vulnerability. And so through that buyback program that the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority has been doing, which is the state government, that's been a really, really good program, and council's been taking the initiative. We've moved our depot, which was in the 2017 and 2022 events, unfortunately flooded, which meant our big trucks that would normally be able to come in and do removal of all flood rubbish and household good rubbish were all flooded as well. And so we had to borrow trucks and get other areas to send equipment in to help our community. Now what we've done is just build a brand new depot out of flood, and all of that infrastructure is now safe. So that we'll be there to help our community feel safe and feel peaceful in the next event. And so that's kind of how our community, I think, really views national security, and it really is in line with the report that's just come out.
I think that's directly in line. It amplifies exactly what the report is saying about what people are experiencing. And if I take from Dale's thing earlier on about liaison and communication between levels of government, we'll come back to what you've raised there, Chris, particularly the issue of resourcing. And I just, for the record, before we came in, I was just speaking to the mayors about resourcing, and I asked the obvious Patsy question, do you have enough money? And I think I've still got scars from having asked the question. So we will come back to that and the intersection of the resourcing and national security and what that means for you as well. But meanwhile, please, tell us.
Thanks, Tom. Strap in, this will take a few minutes, mine. I can normally do off the cuff for about 7 or 8 dot points. This exceeded that, so I'll be reading it to you, but I also wanted to cover off on some of the things that I read in the report, or the Community Consultations report, but also things from 25 years of listening to community. So just strap in. And I'm glad Chris covered off on climate change. I knew she was on the panel and I wouldn't have to touch that one. She'd be all over it. So thanks again for the invitation to talk. I just want to give you some framing stuff about myself, but also about the city, so you understand some of the things I'm going to talk about then. I've lived in the Riverina my whole life and have had the honour of being a councillor on 2 different councils over a period of 25 years, one being my hometown of Gundagai, which we've talked about before, which is a small rural council, and the other is Wagga Wagga, being a large regional council. Quite a difference in size and operation, but that experience has given me the luxury of serving communities of varying sizes and structure, each of which have their own unique but also sometimes common characteristics. Wagga is approximately 450 kilometres from both Sydney and Melbourne and 230 kilometres from Canberra. Over the next 10 to 15 years, more than $15 billion is earmarked for infrastructure projects in the Wagga and surrounding region. A few examples of what's up and coming or underway. The Humulink electricity transmission from Wagga to Goulburn, $2 billion. The Energy Connect electricity transmission, which is just about finished, $2 billion. Snowy 2.0 and Connect, $5 billion. The Defence Estate upgrades, and apologies for any Army or Air Force in the crowd. They're currently happening at Forest Hill and Kapuka, about to start on a 9-year program. It's approximately $1.3 billion that's coming to the city for that, but that changes every day depending on who's approved what and what upgrades they're put in for and variations. We also have a 4,500 hectare special activation precinct. There are half a dozen of those around the state. We have a river in an integrated freight and logistics hub which council initiated the building on, and then state and fed came to the party with funding. Viz is the operator for that. It operates as an open access container terminal with a 6-kilometre spur line off the main Sydney-Melbourne line. And we also have inland rail going through Wagga. That's a $1 billion project from Albury to Illabo. So there's a lot of other things I could talk about in infrastructure, but that's the quick ones. The gross regional product just in the Riverina is $5.64 billion. Population in Wagga is 68,000, forecast to go to about 83 in the next 10 or 15 years. Total workforce of around 39,000. I was going to be smart, but I won't. But 65% of the population have a certificate level qualification or higher. So if you have any perceptions that rural and regional people aren't so qualified, well, we are. 3 university campuses, Notre Dame, CSU, UNSW. We're a military city. We have one RTB, which is all the recruits. Everyone in the army in the entire country goes through Wagga for 13 weeks. They either love it or they hate it, but they never forget their time in Wagga. The RAF base is there with all the Air Force and Navy training as well, so with 3 forces. We're serviced by Qantas and Rex, and one of the big ones for me, and it's interesting, that's why we have different panellists here. Wagga has 115 nationalities and over 100 languages spoken in the city. In relation to the discussions that are undertaken, there are an infinite number of factors that could impact that discussion, but for our community, for me, the 3 key factors that impact on a discussion in this space are the population of the city and the region, the existence of military bases in the city, and they are integral to the military infrastructure across the country, but how that impacts people's thinking because they actually live where the bases are, and the diversity and fabric of our population in relation to countries of origin that I talked about before that has been built up over 50 years. I had to cut a few paragraphs out because Tom said I was too naughty and it was too long. Prior to discussing a number of items raised in our discussions as part of the consultation and also the themes identified in the report that we received, it is important to note that due to the unique makeup of communities, the perspectives and opinions of each community, as you're hearing, will be different when raising an issue such as security. What one community thinks is critical in relation to their security may not even be on another one's radar. There is no national solution, there's no national definition. Everything is unique to the area you're talking about. In no particular order, I wish to work through a number of themes that I observe and receive feedback in Wagga over the last 12 or 15 years on council there. Not surprisingly, they align with some of the global themes. And if you haven't, you've obviously all read the report because you're sitting in the conference, but the item for me is, and I've already told a couple of people, figure 1 on page 17 of the consultations engagement report. That encapsulates everything for me about what we're here for and what you really should focus on aside from your geopolitical type thinking. So military city, as I mentioned earlier, it's host to all 3 services in the military. 1 RTB, Kapuka, is the entry for all recruits into the Army, and RAF does all the other training for Air Force and Navy. Both bases have been in existence since World War II, so the visibility and contribution to the city, the essence of the city, is high. This in some ways contributes to a general feeling of comfort around the region about activity in the military space. We see them, we interact them, I see them all the time, so they're part of the city, that's just what it is. So the military isn't a foreign thing to us having them in the city. Community members are used to seeing them around coffee shops, wherever, and as such is not a foreign concept to us. Digital vulnerabilities, which is one that I particularly wanted to talk on in rural and regional areas. these topics and all of these, for me, come back to security and the security in your each and everyday life. That, to me, is what we're talking about. These topics have gained greater visibility in the last couple of years, but been around for quite some time. This is an area which I would indicate that in our community is west of the divide, and I can say that because I'm the only one here west of the divide, that people express a high degree of concern about in relation to their personal security and the continuity of everyday life that's referred to in the report. If you're a member of the community that is aware of the issues of cybersecurity, then the stress level is always high because you're watching out for it. You're always on the look for suspicious posts, messages, and all the other things that come out to you. But then you have the others in the community who have no awareness in the space, and for them it's even worse. They're not aware of what to look for. They accidentally hit on a link or whatever, and who knows what's going to happen to them, whether their identity's taken, funds are taken, whatever. So there's two different ways to look at that. So and it's not emerging, it's been around for a long time, but it's getting worse and worse, and I think it's becoming more prevalent in people's front of mind as far as their personal security. Infrastructure. There are many I'll only touch on one item of infrastructure. There are many concerns in relation to infrastructure, but one that is particularly high in our area is the growth in the electricity infrastructure. This has a dual effect on our region. From one perspective, the recent upgrading of our 330 kV substation in the city has substantially increased its capacity. The intention is that it will provide a critical connection between New South Wales, South Australia and Victoria. All those main projects will come to Wagga, allowing more renewable energy to be shared. This is a positive for our area in that due to the growth in this area, Riverina will have some of the most stable power capacity in the state or even nationally for the next 20 or 30 years. The downside is actually that stability. What we're seeing now, as is happening in a number of other areas, is a tsunami of applications at both council and state significant approval levels for solar farms. We haven't had too many wind ones yet, but solar farms, no one's against them per se. Managed well, this can work, but the approvals coming forward are not taking into account the highly productive agricultural land in our area and the loss of that contribution to our economy. That's the flip side of it. People are in support of a balanced provision of infrastructure in this space, but don't feel secure in the continuation of the level it's at right now. The scales need to be balanced a bit better. Got a short one on the judicial system. I didn't want to touch on it too much. I wasn't sure if there was going to be anyone formal in the room who I could insult, or is there? There may well be. Oh, okay. So it's only one paragraph. One area that will not cover in too much detail is the lack of faith in our community and other regional communities in relation to the judiciary and the disconnect between them and the expectations of communities in relation to ensure safe communities, whether that be in relation to parole conditions, sentencing or oversight in those areas. It is definitely an issue on the increase in discussions in our region. Diversity and community, and I got a little bit on this, but it's interesting, the comparison. In this area, I consistently receive feedback in relation to diversity and inclusion that exists in our community, in relation to refugees and skilled migrants. Over the years, I've talked to a large number of people about this and have landed on the premise, but because we've been taking particularly refugees the last 5 or 6 years, probably 4,000 to 5,000, but because that's been happening since 1974, there are no issues, because to me, the feedback I continually get is it's the norm. It's what's been happening for 2 generations. So there are no issues because that's how our city is formed. Different diaspora live spread across the entire city with no concentration of one diaspora in one particular geographical area. This then feeds into a feeling of comfort of security in relation to having a large number of community members from many countries. It's not just an issue that people get stressed about and feel uncomfortable. That just doesn't happen in Wagga. It is an example that some other communities in Australia could learn from. And I didn't write. When I wrote that, I wasn't thinking it. As late as this Saturday, I attended a Nauru's cultural event that included all Persian members of our community. It also had, in addition, other community members from a variety of countries of origin and a variety of backgrounds who were there to celebrate the culture, but also each other in these current trying times. And I don't need to outline what that is. You all know that. That's the elephant in the room. But in that room, for those 70 people that were there in the library when that was happening, there was no division. Everyone supported everyone. And if anyone got emotional when they were talking, there was nothing but support. So at a local level, that's how it can differ from what you hear from the national stage. Under-resourced. I was going to talk about under-resourcing, but I think Tom's going to take us down that path, so I'll skip that one. Lack of faith in state and federal governments. Apology to any politician in the room. The theme in your documents, call it trust in the messengers, I think is the item on the theme wheel. But for me, a lot of the issues in people's comfort level in rural and regional areas, and even metros, is the faith in state and federal governments themselves. This is not an overnight situation, but one that has grown over many decades with continual messaging from government that to the community seems focused on the political opportunism rather than support for communities. People do not feel that their government is not standing with them, but in some ways is either standing in their road to moving forward or promising action without ever following through with that action and the work needed to make it happen. With the never-ending election cycles, this does not assist at all. By the time a new government is in and spend their whole first term reviewing everything the last government did, and then they contemplate that, we're back to the ballot box to vote again, and we've seen no change at all, and that you continue to see that state and federal. A true collaborative relationship between local government and state and federal could move this forward, but the relationship there never reaches that level in relation to trust or action by all. Only got one page to go. This one's interesting, but throw me out if you like, it doesn't worry me. Trump effect. One of the emerging areas in relation to people in our community and their feeling of security and comfort in relation to their everyday life is the effect of President Trump. In 25 years in local government, I have never heard people raise the issue of any US president as to the impact on their quality of life in the area they're living in, ever. 25 years I've been at this, I've never heard it. So whether that is in relation to the relationship between Australia and the US, the future of our core agriculture and industrial industries, or the instability of multiple crisis points around the world. They still have issues in relation to state and federal government, as I've already talked about, but the geopolitical situation is rising on the radar in our regional areas. That's not saying it's front of mind. All those other areas are more front of mind. But the thing is, I've never heard so much about him. It's not the office, it's not the country, it's the personality. This has now entered into conversation where it has not been in the past. People are not feeling comfortable at all, and I've seen their level of faith in security in everyday life has been impacted. Just look at what's happening in the fuel/toilet paper issue happening right now. The prices, and then people doing runs on things. So that is the Trump effect for me. It's actually coming to front of mind in people's conversations. They won't talk about Albo, but they'll talk about Trump. I must say again how important it was to hold these community consultations. It was fantastic to be listened to and have conversations, and I'm sure everyone who had them will say that, because by that, and just by the four of us being here today, you're getting a different perspective. It's not security to people in this country isn't all geopolitical, it isn't all what's happening all around the world. It's, as Tom said, it's what's happening in their hometown or their home region. And I think I've said enough, and I'll get in trouble later for going too long. Thanks, Tom.
All good. Thanks, Dallas. But what you've just said, two things. First of all, is a level of complexity and sophistication in your region that I think most people in cities, in the major cities in Australia, wouldn't be aware of, and they wouldn't touch it on a daily basis. And it's really important, I think, to have those conversations here, and then also really interesting points about infrastructure and really significant infrastructure that sit in the local government area. So, and just by the by, I can tell you as someone who spent 12 months at Kapooka doing instructing, all the staff loved it there rather than hated it. And I still remember every Monday morning listening to the news for the results of a team called Yiranquinti Ganmain Grong Grong, which used to be a team, and that phrase is still with me.
Now they've added Matong on the end.
There we go. So, back to the city.
Great, thank you. Yeah, back to the city, into Willoughby, which is located on the north shore of Sydney, about 8 kilometres from the CBD, about a 10-minute drive. And of course, when we talk about national security, we often think about borders and defence and intelligence, but increasingly security is also shaped by something much close to home, as we've touched on today. It's the strength, cohesion and resilience of our communities. Now, Willoughby is one of the most culturally diverse local government areas in New South Wales. We actually call ourselves the City of Diversity. That diversity started many, many years ago. We obviously, the Gamaragal people were the first people of Willoughby. But then we had Chinese migrants coming in and creating Chinese market gardens. We've had Greek and Italian communities come in. We've had the Armenian diaspora really flourish in our community in Willoughby. And most recently, Asian communities such as the Chinese, Korean, Japanese. The Japanese population in Willoughby is the largest population of Japanese in Australia. And now increasingly, the Indian community is strengthening. So we are the City of Diversity, but that diversity is one of our strengths, but it's also not self-sustaining. It requires care and intention and investment to truly flourish. And so today I just wanted to touch on a few things we do from a proactive perspective in terms of social cohesion, which is at the heart of our diversity. And I know that Anthea said there is no definition of social cohesion, but I see it as the glue that holds communities together. It underpins trust and safety and resilience, and it also supports economic participation, democratic engagement and wellbeing. But it also must be actively monitored, built and maintained. And this is where local government plays a critical role. We're the closest level of government to the community. We see emerging tensions early, we understand local dynamics deeply, and importantly, we also listen through ongoing community consultation and engagement, ensuring our work reflects the lived experience of our residents. We've got, as would all of these councils here represented, many different services that we provide our community, not just rates, roads and rubbish, which is the three that are always mentioned. We've got our libraries, we've got youth programs, we've got community centres, there's parks, playgrounds, events. We shape how people connect, participate and feel about where they live. And in Willoughby, this is embedded in everything we do. We've got a program called Mosaic, which is the Multicultural One-Stop Information and Activity Centre, which has been going for over 30 years. And Mosaic offers classes, programs, social gatherings for multicultural people in our community. So they might be coming together with their own community, but they also do cross-cultural collaboration as well. And it's been such a successful program that continues to this day. Many, many volunteers as well in our multicultural centre, and also the Doherty Community Centre, which is a space for connection and support as well. We've also got programs like Inspire to Lead, which is a fabulous initiative kicked off a few years ago, bringing together leaders across our multicultural communities, across multi-faiths, and they learn from each other. And it's just been really successful as well. And we've also got another initiative called High Neighbours, which is for apartment dwellers, and over 40% of people in Willoughby live in apartments. So it is important to provide that social cohesion within the apartment community. So we've started programs that bring people down at the ground level. They get together, have barbecues, and it's been such a successful program as well. And then, of course, we've got our libraries with almost 900,000 visits a year, and these are trusted third spaces where people can learn and connect and feel a sense of belonging. And we also invest in youth services and spaces, including our youth centre and our Willoughby Youth Action Group, which provides a safe, welcoming environment where young people can connect and build confidence and feel they belong as well. We also bring people together through our multicultural events, our major community events, from our Lunar New Year Festival, which brings in about $80 million to the economy every year, and Diwali, and also our Gai Maraigal Festival, which is our Indigenous festival, and our 6-week Emerge Festival, which happens over spring. And these events create shared experience that build understanding across cultures. And I'll just say that in the Emerge Festival last year, we actually had one of those apartment communities actually march in our parade. So they had a sign saying ex-apartment dwellers, and they were marching in the Emerge Festival parade. We also welcome new residents with a Welcome to Willoughby postcard at citizenship ceremonies in different languages, and we connect them to services from day one. And in 2024, we joined the Welcoming Cities Network, reinforcing our commitment to building an inclusive, socially cohesive community. And also we've got our community grants program and partnerships with organisations such as Lifeline. They've got a pop-up in our library, and also local police, which further strengthen this work. Just on the citizenship ceremony, I just want to share a brief story. Recently, I named local student Zaina our Youth Citizen of the Year. And it's always a lovely event to have our Citizens of the Year named. But this was particularly poignant because just a few years earlier, Zaina had become a citizen herself. She was, I conferred citizenships on her at one of our citizenship ceremony. And at every ceremony, I do encourage residents to get involved, and new citizens to really get involved in the community. We talk about the volunteering options through council and other community organisations, and ask people to play an active role in the community. And Zaina obviously did exactly that. She's now involved in our Willoughby Youth Action Group. She regularly attends our youth centre. She's involved in leadership programs at her school, and she uses our library as a third space to study and connect and feel part of the community. And just last week, I hosted a morning tea for all our Citizens of the Year, and it was just lovely to see her talking with our other citizens who are different ages, from different cultural backgrounds. They're coming together and talking about other ways that they can impact the community. So it's just a powerful reminder that when people feel welcomed and empowered, they just don't belong. They actually help strengthen the resilience of the community around them. And that's exactly what we're trying to create at Willoughby, a community where people feel empowered to step forward, get involved, and make a meaningful difference. And all of this matters because social cohesion isn't just a soft outcome, it's actually preventative infrastructure. And I know that we're going to talk about infrastructure. Preparedness and resilience doesn't happen by chance. It's built through deliberate engagement, informed by evidence and shaped with the community. Strong, connected communities are more resilient to misinformation, less vulnerable to division, and better equipped to navigate uncertainty and change. The National Anti-Racism Framework recognises local government as a key partner in this work, and I was very excited to see last week this reinforced at a state level with new guidance and funding now available through the New South Wales Government to support councils in developing anti-racism strategies. So that was announced last week. And in Willoughby, while social cohesion is already embedded across much of what we do, we're also developing a dedicated social cohesion strategy ourselves to strengthen our approach and guide future action. This alignment across all levels of government is critical because local action does strengthen national outcomes. And the work must be proactive. We can't wait for fractures to appear before we act. We know that diversity becomes a strength when it is supported by good policy, strong leadership and genuine connection. When people feel seen, safe and valued, communities thrive. For councils, the opportunity is clear to lead with values, strengthen partnerships, invest in connection and embed community consultation and social research into decision making. In Willoughby, we're really proud of the work we're doing, but we also know it is ongoing. As Anthea said, you just can't stop. You just don't become socially cohesive. It's ongoing work. But national resilience doesn't just start at the border. It starts on our streets. It starts in our neighbourhoods and in our everyday interactions between people. And that is where local government can make the greatest contribution. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much, Tanya. And I think, again, from each of the mayors we've heard today, this incredible level of understanding of national security at a local level. And just to put words in your mouth, when you're talking about some of those local resources, libraries and community centres, because of the work that they do, and some of the work that the libraries would be doing is helping people deal with mis and disinformation and lessons, in themselves, they're part of our national security architecture because they really assist with that, unless you've got a different view from that, Tanya. But no. Yeah. Please.
No, that's absolutely right. I think libraries are often just thought of as a place to go and get out your books, but increasingly they're becoming a really important part of communities where people can feel safe. They feel cool. That it's from a climate change perspective, it's a place where you can go to actually have some respite from the heat or from the cold, and to connect and get information. I mean, as I mentioned, we've got Lifeline now in our library having a pop-up once a week, so people can actually feel that they can go and talk to somebody as well.
Great.
It also came out as the number one community facility available for the respondents from 6 of the fastest growing communities in Australia. So libraries are essential.
And while we've got you with the microphone, Anthony, just before I ask the mayors the big question about what can we change and how much money do you want, anything that popped out there that surprised you against the research that you've done? You might want to talk about that community cohesion piece as well. But
well, I would. This is more a thinking while I'm speaking type of process. It is interesting that we're here talking about national security, and yet now what I work on, what I study is social cohesion, but specifically with the transition of migrants into Australian society. So I have a particular bent in that direction. But that said, it is interesting that we're here talking about national security, and yet this diversity component keeps coming up. And in actual fact, if you're thinking social cohesion, we should be talking about issues and not necessarily about multicultural versus other or whatever. It's really not necessarily helpful from a social cohesion perspective, even though I recognise what Dale has said about the introduction of new groups. They aren't necessarily the things that are going to disrupt your social cohesion. It's something that everybody has to work through. And I would point to the fact that we're a relatively young democracy. And in actual fact, we have 320 different ethnicities, multiple religions, well over 200 religions that exist in Australia. And we have managed to be a welcoming and inclusive place for all of those different ethnicities and religions to come to. So, and part of that has to do with the fact that we have a very broad-minded and flexible view of the Australian identity and what the components are that fit within that umbrella of Australian identity. So I think we should be actually really thrilled by the fact that we have made so much progress in a relatively short amount of time. We shouldn't rest on our laurels. We've got a long way to go, but we are doing the right thing, and it happens at the local council level.
Well, look, what I think we've just heard from is a really sophisticated view of national security at the local level from a range of different perspectives. And with that level of sophistication comes knowledge about the future as well, about what you'd like to see. So what's the one thing, I'm going to ask each of you, what's the one thing that Australia should change with our approach to national security from a local perspective? So here's your chance to throw some more mud or whatever you'd like to do. And I might go to you first, Dan. You might even think about your communications piece that we spoke about as well. But what's that one thing that you think should change?
I think it comes down to state and government when they're communicating with local government to include listening. At the minute we're just talked to, we're told this is what we're doing, this is how it will affect you. There's no two-way street. So if I could change one thing, it would be listening. Listen to the local government. We're at the ground level, and everyone you talk to says, local government has the greatest contact with the community. And it is. We go shopping in a regional or rural city and you run in. My kids won't shop with me anymore because to getting milk is a 2-hour trip. But we have that engagement across the spectrum because normally local government, you're not political. You're there for the community. And that's the big difference. Everyone will engage with a local councillor. Not everyone will engage with a local politician.
So, and to be very clear, so you feel with your council that there isn't access into state and federal government to talk about some of these issues?
No, we get access, but it's we get talked at. And basically it's, what do you want? What are you saying? We give them a brief, and the brief goes in the bin. It's file 13. It's lost, and 3 months later we're talking about the same thing because an issue's come up where they didn't listen to what we were saying. And I think that's really, really important. We probably see it before it happens at a state or national level, and a lot of the fires can get put out if you talk to your local government.
So, a critical part of the national security infrastructure being, in your view, largely ignored, talked at rather than listened to.
Absolutely correct.
Chris?
Thanks, Tom. I think if I had to ask to change one thing, it would be that the federal government and to some extent the state understand that if we can't deliver those day-to-day service, if we can't deliver continuity of normal life to make people feel safe and secure, then they won't trust any level of government, not ours, not theirs, not the state. And so if we could get them to change their thinking to understand that rather than spending that 97% of the budget for emergency on responses and recovery, and 3% on mitigation, if we can turn that equation around and spend the money on mitigation, because we then understand that mitigation is helping us to save trust in our government, is helping us not to open the door to distrust, to leaning towards extreme kind of politics that really do disrupt our community.
And just to pick up on a point that somebody made earlier on in one of the earlier panels about quite often citizens don't recognise that there's different levels of government. They think it's government. And so unless we do some of those things, I think, and recognise where we need to put those resources, it's difficult, because even when I was Electoral Commissioner, citizens didn't know there was a state commission and a federal commission. It's just government. And I think the allocation of resources there is critical, which again we'll come back to in a moment.
I think I'd like to agree. It's about councils or local government and state and federal government listening to us. We have expertise in the area. As everyone keeps saying, we're the closest level of government to community, but continually we get talked at. But the difference also is that there's no acknowledgement of our expertise in those areas. And if they were listening to us, things would happen. And 2 live examples I have in the last 6 months, or one was last week. There are dharmas across Australia, designated migration zones, and there was a move to expand the Arana Dharma further around the state to take in west of there and also down towards Wagga. All local government talked about it. We talked to state. They actually agreed. Then we went to the federal government, and last week they've come out and said, no, we're not doing that. And they're screaming, and this isn't refugees, this is skill migrants. They've shut that down. They're not allowing that to happen. So that shuts a pathway for all of the regional areas who are screaming for professionals in every area and all the essential services. We just can't, that opportunity has gone now because those 2 governments won't talk to each other. So it's not just state and federal not talking to us, it's talking amongst each other. And the other one is the PALM scheme, which I'm fairly expert on now over the last 6 months, but I don't know if anyone else in the room is, but people generally ask me, the first thing is, what does that stand for? So it's a specific labour mobility scheme. There's nearly 31,000 people in this country on that visa, 31,000 people. And I kept getting representations from the Pacific Islander community because we have a lot in the Riverina. And the way it was set up by the federal government and the state government, but in this case the federal government, was just horrendous. There are people disengaging and becoming illegals and chased down for no fault of their own. It's the systemic issues they put in place. It took myself and a group of other mayors to form a mayoral alliance and push and push and push and push and push for 6 months to any politician we could find until they actually started doing something. And again, that's a current example of the inability for them to think that local government actually has an idea and then to listen to it and to actually do something from it. They're 2 current examples. So That for me would be the thing. If I could switch off the politics and the election cycle and we actually work together for the betterment of all of our communities, that for me would be my magic wish.
And so for the first three, broadly, there's this communication between government which is critical, which doesn't seem to be happening at your level. So are we going to have a repeat of this, Tanya? Are we...
The overarching theme here, I think, is respect. So it is about listening, it's about trust, but essentially it's about respect. Respect for what we do at the local government level, what we can do if we were afforded the opportunity to do it, if we were listened to, if we had the funding available to do it, which we are doing things on the smell of an oily rag and we have to beg and plead for grant funding all the time. So it comes down to respect coming down from the federal and state government levels. I think our communities trust us. We were talking about this earlier, but I don't think the state and federal governments trust local government.
A friend of mine who works in local government has frequently said that federal and state governments treat local government as just a delivery agency and what would you know, and we don't want your knowledge. Exactly right. And is that a feeling that you have as well?
Premier Minns told us to roll over.
Right. Well, we might avoid that one. But I do want to finish somehow on a resourcing question, but I'm conscious that time is moving on. So I want to ask you about something that popped out of the report on what the community have told us about fragile arteries. And Dallas, you started talking about infrastructure and you had a great view of where the infrastructure lies, and there's a lot of vulnerability in local communities with infrastructure, and that's what the community is telling us. How well set up are local authorities and councils to identify those vulnerabilities and to share that information with the national security community? While you've got the microphone, go for it, Dallas, and then we'll...
Look, I'll bring it back to other things that are as relevant to local government. It's not just resourcing. I talked about electricity infrastructure. That's one example. But another mayors might comment on this, but it's the basics of the road. You talk about the veins. To me, roads, bridges. I know we're not roads, rates and rubbish. That's not all we do, but it is part of what we do. And Chris was talking about climate change earlier, and it took years and years and we're still not there. Those veins are critical to get things from one spot to another in a time. If we have a conflict here, God, I hope it's not in the rural and regional areas because there's potholes everywhere. So we just don't get enough funding for those sort of things. But also, it's.
Well, hang on. We've been teasing everyone about resourcing. We'll keep coming to that.
It's a serious thing.
Well, given you're there, as we're answering this question, just also throw in terms of critical vulnerabilities that you can identify and share. But tell me a little about resourcing. What could we do differently here to help local government with resourcing?
One, if you want me to pick one and be quick on it, it's betterment. So it's taken local government years to get the state government and the feds to a certain extent to listen to what betterment is. And all betterment is, if you have a bridge or a piece of infrastructure that continually gets flooded or continually gets impacted and replaced, governments will not fund you, or in the past would not fund you. They would only fund you to replace it as it was. They won't think, oh, hang on, climate change or for whatever other reason, we need to build that bridge a bit higher or a different material. It was
they're
like
not investing in resilience in that case, is it?
Exactly. And we haven't still got there, but we're getting there. But it's literally banging your head against a brick wall to get them to even take on the concept of betterment and funding that, because then we wouldn't be back a second and a third time.
So critical infrastructure, identification and funding.
Yeah, the funding, 0.5% of federal taxation goes to local government. We've been pushing for that to be increased to 1%. We're asking for another 0.5%. It's nothing, but it would make such a difference to the communities which we serve. So that in itself would be huge.
Chris?
Yeah, so I'm in a very uncomfortable position of having a water supply. I know state government normally delivers water, but there's a lot of local governments that are water supply operators as well, and we are. And we have the situation that our water supply is currently only going to deliver a secure supply for our population for the next 2 years. And so that's a very, very short time frame to upgrade a dam or build a new dam or something. So we've been working on trying to improve that. And the cost to upgrade that dam is $300 million. And we went to the federal government last week or the week before and explained the situation. We said, this is critical infrastructure. We have to get help. And they said, I'm sorry, but the National Grid water supply funding is all allocated and there's nothing we can do. And, I don't know what we're supposed to do with that.
I'm gonna go with Dallas. Roads and infrastructure cost shifting and putting the blame on local council is horrendous. We talk about safety, security, and anger in the community. A lot of the anger in the community is coming from the cost shifting of state government, and I don't know what it's like in New South Wales. In Victoria, it's horrendous. Two examples. Princess Highway, M1, through our town. One pothole, 28 cars put on the side of the road. The police had to roll up and block the road for a day and a half. So 2 police cars blocking a pothole until it could get fixed. The minister responsible's response was, I didn't see a pothole in the photos. 28 cars on the side of the road with wrecked rims. The second one is the community's getting really, really sick of everything being blamed on local government when we've got no money. And that's the biggest problem. We talk about cost shifting. We at one stage used to have 100% funding for our libraries in Victoria. We're now down to 15%. We talk about libraries being really important. We as a council are having to look at our hours of our libraries and cutting it back, and the community's getting angry, and that they're wearing it at council, whereas it's a state government cutting funding, and it's having a huge effect. And as Anthea said, libraries are a place people go to feel secure and to feel the warmth and everything. It's just cutting those security blankets out of the community, and it's falling back onto local government, and it's all state and federal doing that local government wears the cost for.
Well, we might move on.
Tom, can I just make one
Please,
comment,
Anthea.
which is the importance of leadership. And in actual fact, you've got 4 people here who can speak so articulately about everyday issues that people are grappling with. And it's this type of leadership that actually does build that level of trust amongst communities, because they know you know exactly what it is they're going through. And so the challenge they have is to overcome the government is government is government, because they're taking on the blame for a whole lot of others that actually can't talk in the same way that they can about what are the issues that are holding people back from actually feeling greater sense of belonging or feeling greater pride in Australia. These are the people who actually know what that means.
I actually wanted to finish off on that concept of trust. There's so much pressure on communities broadly, and that issue of trust and about who people can trust and where they get information from. So I wanted to probably come to one of our last questions before we start thinking about opening up. But given what the report says about mis and disinformation and people struggling with understanding what information to trust, what can local government do to help inoculate citizens against some of this stuff and to build levels of trust across the community? And we've had some of that today with some of the answers already, but I wanted to leave you with that point about trust and about what you could do. So, Chris, you've got your microphone up. I might go to you first.
Yeah, I think we need to be really proactive in terms of filling that information gap, making sure that we do provide the real information out there, and try to encourage people to come to us as the trusted source, and just try to make sure that the information that we put out there isn't all about how good we are or everything. It's real. This is the situation that we have. This is what we're trying to do about it. Give us your feedback, and actually listening. I think that's what will help us have that position of trust with the community.
So if you don't sugarcoat stuff, people know they can actually trust that information. It is real, and that helps build trust across government as well, I think. So, great.
I completely agree with what Chris just said, but also what we do on a practical level. The Chamber of Commerce in Wagga do cybersecurity and business type stuff, and that's what they should do. What we do in our library, again, underfunded, but we won't harp on that, we run cybersecurity type classes for communities. And what we also do, it happens in a few communities across the state, but we run those IT savvy classes, but also cybersecurity classes, but we also run them in language. So we're not just running them in English, we're running them in Kamanji, which is a Yazidi dialect, because we have a lot of Yazidis in Wagga. We run it in Burmese and any other presenter we can get. So as well as getting the trusted information out through sources that community can trust, because they actually trust what we're telling them, it's feet on the ground trying to do some training in the library with community members who want to come in, or even going out to different service clubs or community groups to work with them.
It might be, I think Tim made the comment earlier on about it's meeting the community where they are and servicing the need in the way they want it serviced, which is exactly what you're talking about there. Tanya, and then we'll go to...
Yeah, I think all of that actually. Making sure the communication is clear, it's consistent, it's true. We're not, as you said, sugarcoating things, and having the programs available so that people can engage in different ways on different things that they're concerned about. But it's really hard to cut through that noise at times, especially in the age of social media, where people just go down the rabbit hole of the echo chamber, and they're only hearing what they're hearing because they're engaged with it. So I think maybe we've got a part to play in that, and making sure our social media feeds are consistent and they're getting across to the majority of the community as well.
All right, well, just before we open up, one last question, and only if you saw something. Is there anything in the report that you saw and thought, oh, crikey, that's something that really surprised me? That it...
I was going to say, one of the things that I think really hit the mark was the lack of security and lack of safety feeling within the local communities. And I think we sort of see it and deal with it on a daily basis, but to have the levels that came out in that report saying members of our community do not feel safe really hits it home. And I think that's something we've heard here. We're all facing the problems of not enough police, not enough engagement. And I think seeing that should be a wake-up call to state and federal governments that at the local level...
For all of us, really.
At a local level, people are worried. And that's not what you want in your community. That leads to disruption and anxiety, and the community bubbles out and we get a whole heap of horrible things happening.
And including Anthea in this as well. Anybody else? Any surprise?
For me, just seeing that the community saw climate change as number 6 in terms of those disrupting factors and that threat to peace and security and safety.
For me, I wasn't surprised, but it was interesting to note that safe and peaceful communities was the number 1 priority. And I actually feel quite a sense of responsibility now, reading that, thinking, okay, well, it starts here at the local government level.
I suppose mine, it was a level of comfort. I'll go back to that diagram I talked about, and the line under it where people feel security is people feeling comfortable in their everyday life. I've always felt that, and most local government people would, but to actually have that in a national security paper really brings... The shock for me was that not everyone's out there thinking geopolitical. Once you actually did the community engagements,
Everyday
that
life
came to the fore, which is what we're trying to say for years.
Anthea?
Well, I would only say, sort of reflecting on what Tim mentioned a little while back, which is the differential between men and women and young people and older people. And in actual fact, the young people are 50 points below the average when it comes to a sense of belonging. And that's dropped off over their lifetime as well. So that is an issue that we need to be aware of. But the point Tim, I think, was making was that we can, often it needs us to delve further into it in order to be able to interpret it properly. And I think when it comes to local government and local areas, they're that much closer to the ability to actually learn how do we interpret this within our particular area. And the only other point I would make is to do with the multilingualism. It is an extraordinary thing that we are embracing multilingualism in a way that we actually can service it in a way that's really particularly important. And there isn't a single There are very few local government authorities in Australia that have similar language makeups of non-English, non-Indigenous languages, virtually none. So every local government area has to deal with it in its own unique way.
Can I just say, first of all, a thank you to the National Security College for undertaking this report. And I couldn't imagine if this was done 10 years ago and we were talking about a national security conference that we'd have local government involved, that we'd have this rich data, and also that someone like the former Electoral Commissioner would be here talking about the issues of national security, and it tells you how far things have moved along. So could you please join me in thanking our excellent panel for their great insights today as well. Thank you very much.